In some respects, Elbe Sexton's story is typical of so many young men of World War II era. Uncommon valor from common beginnings. He was born May 17, 1921, grew up, was inducted, and entered military service in September of 1942. He served until the war's end, separating December 8, 1945. His story differs from some others in the wide-ranging areas in which he served. During those 40 months, in addition to his time spent in the U.S., he was involved in campaigns at Kiska in the Aleutians, the Pacific islands of Kwajalein, Leyte, the Marshalls, and the Philippine Islands. During those campaigns, he was awarded 3 battle stars, the Philippine Liberation Ribbon, the World War II Victory Medal, the American Theater Ribbon, the Asiatic Pacific Ribbon, the Good Conduct Medal, and the Purple Heart for wounds received January 4, 1945 at Leyte. That order reads as follows.
The following interview is being conducted at the Fargo Air Museum on 21 August 2007 in conjunction with the Veterans Oral History Project. The interviewers are Bob Miller and myself, Tom Asklund, and the subject person is Elbe Sexton, a veteran of World War II. Good morning, Elbe, and welcome.
Good morning.
Will you give us your full name
LBF Sexton,
and your date of birth, please?
5/17/21,
And that makes you how old?
86,
And where were you born, Elbe?
in Lockwood, Missouri.
And your parents?
My parents' name was Ruel and Laura Sexton.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I had 2 brothers and 3 sisters, Elvin and Homer, and Opal and Clara and Henley. All of those are deceased, but 2 girls.
Were any of those in the military?
No.
When did you enter the military?
September 11th, 1942. And the reason I was a little bit delayed was because my father had died in 41, and I was the sole supporter of my mother and 1 sister. And when they passed the Dependency Act, by then I went in service in
Where did you enter the service?
Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. I was inducted there.
And you were in what branch?
Army.
Where did you take your basic training?
Camp Alders, Texas, which is in the Fort Worth area.
And go ahead.
After basic training, I was held over for OCS school, and I was a cadre there for a while. And after that, there were 6 of us, and we shipped around 2 or 3 different places. They couldn't seem to make up their mind, and I think finally they decided that they didn't need any more OCS people. So then I joined the 184th Infantry Regiment, which is a California National Guard unit.
Where were you assigned after that?
Well, we did our training in California, and then from there we went to Alaska, the Aleutians, I should say.
What were your duties there, Elbe?
Well, I started out as a radio operator, and later on, the radios proved to be of no use in the Pacific. So then I went into the squad leader program.
Were you ever stationed with any hometown people or friends or relatives?
No, not at all. I never had a furlough all the period of time I was in the service, except a sick leave furlough when I got back to the States.
How long were you in the service?
Well, it's 3 years. It's about an hour in a year and 4 months, I think, in a year and 8 months stateside.
Do you remember what your pay was at that time?
Well, I'm guessing about $30 a month.
Did you see you said you spent some time overseas. How long were you overseas?
A year and 4 months.
And can you tell us where you were located over there?
Yes, it started at the Aleutians, and the time we went up there, they'd had a submarine scare off the west coast. And you remember the Kaiser ships, some of those had been broken apart. And we were in 2 of them. And because of the scare, we stayed just as close to the shore as we could. And the other ship was the lead ship in front of us. And one moment we'd see the back end of the ship come out of the water, and the next moment we'd see the front end of the ship come out of the water. And you should have seen the mess hall when we got there. It was really a mess. One guy didn't get out of his bunk all the way up there. And Kaiser went into the car business afterwards. He made the Kaiser Fraser, and they weren't any better than his ships.
What islands were you on?
On the Aleutian Islands, and when we were on Kiska, and the Japanese had left there probably the day beforehand, so that turned out to be kind of a dry run. But we had an interesting landing. We couldn't make a regular amphibious landing because of the terrain. So, and we were equipped for winter, so we had a huge backpack. And the short guys were lucky we had a huge backpack because we waded through water, and had it not been for them, they might have drowned because the backpack was buoyant. And it was just dark as pitch there. We had to make a rope path to the bathroom because when it got dark, it was just black.
Now you served in the islands in the Marshalls?
Yeah, we went to the Marshall Islands first, Kwajalein, and the reason we took that island was because it had a natural harbor. And all the coral in both islands was poisonous. So we couldn't make it a regular amphibious landing. They had some small metal jeeps that we landed on in those. And at that time I was in company headquarters, and they had shelled that island with artillery and naval ships. And there was a unexploded shell on the beach. And that made a nice hole in the ground. That's where our company headquarters set up. The first night, we lost contact with the troops ahead of us. And again, it was black as pitch. And being the radio man, I had to crawl on my stomach and follow the wire until I found the break. And then I was able to repair it. And the scary part was coming back, because the guys in the camp didn't know if I was enemy or a friend. But I said, here I come, so everything worked out all right. That island was a beautiful island. We'd had training in Hawaii for an island shaped like that, so it made it easier for us to land and get around. After the island was seized, we knew that there was a Japanese soldier in a tunnel, and he had a native woman with him. Well, I was lucky. I drew the job of rescuing the lady, but some other people had to go in the tunnel and take care of the soldier. Then after that, they didn't have any minesweepers, so they didn't know if the harbor had any mines in it. So they called for volunteers to get an LCI and tour the harbor. I was one of the two that volunteered, and we probably took a couple of hours to cover the whole harbor, so we were sure there weren't any mines. And if there had been one, I'd probably still be flying. Afterwards, my lieutenant said, well, for that act of bravery, I should have put you in for Silver Star, but I didn't get around to it. So and I've tried to get my Silver Star, and there's no military record, so I can't get anything. I've even tried the congressman, and they just kind of pass it off, so that's where it is.
Were you injured at any time?
I wasn't injured there. We left there and we went to the Philippines, and we made our landing on the same day that they had the Battle of Leyte Gulf. That's the last major naval battle in the war. Another person and myself were left on the beach to guard the ammunition dump. So we had a bird's eye view of the battle out. Wasn't too far from us. We could hear the firing and we see the flashes, and so then I think the Japanese were able to get two ships back to home, and the battle was over. The next day I saw a Zero and a P-38 in a dogfight, and the Zero pilot was pretty smart, because when I saw him going down, he was going straight down and smoking like he'd been hit. Well, what he had done, he changed the carburation, and when he got close to the ocean, he straightened out and flew straight away and got away. And of course, the P-38 guy was out of it then because he was too far away. And then we of course secured the island, and except that was a very, very different island. There was swamps, there was mountains, there were places that underbrush, so the Japanese were hard to find. We went through a rainy season, which of course happens in war, it seems like, and so we dug foxholes that were deep enough that we could sit in, and put a tarp over our head, and for 3 nights we slept in the foxhole with water up to our chest. The only way we could get anything dry was an extra pair of socks. We'd put them under our uniform, and that would get them dry. Then, as it progressed, we went on several different missions of patrolling, and I was the patrol leader. And I was lucky in that although we lost a lot of men in the patrol, the only one that I ever saw hit was a lieutenant. He and I we had stopped for a rest, and we were sitting side by side, and he got shot in the back. And I had my hands sitting out to the right, and they missed me, but just got close enough for the bullet to spray dirt upon my hand. And then on the final patrol I was on, it was a mountainous area, and we came up this mountain, and I was accustomed to what the Japanese did for camouflage and for booby traps. So we came up, and I told my patrol, I says, I want you all to take cover because this is a suspicious looking place to me. And ahead of me was a small stream and a kind of a row of small trees. So I went through there, and sure enough, there was a booby trap. And what they used for booby traps was, at that time, the Japanese had these cheap wristwatches. And of course, the soldiers were looking for those cheap wristwatches. So I turned around and walked back, and I says, keep your cover because it looks like it's dangerous here. And then that's when I got hit. And I was hit in the left leg just below the knee. And we were quite a ways from out from the main area, so I felt so sorry for those four poor guys that had to carry me back. And when I got there, it was almost dark, and there was a whole mess of us on the ground, and they must have given me some strong injection to kill the pain because I didn't know anything about what happened during the night. But I woke up the next morning and I had a cast on my leg that's made out of the bamboo tree, and that was, the branches were just right for making a cast. Well, then the next day, I went up, I was taken up on a hill. This was on the opposite side of the island from the ocean. And they had a runway there made out of these metal mesh, and a C-47 landed, and two of us were flown down to the beach to board a hospital ship. And when we got in that hospital ship, we had a malt, and I've never had anything taste better than that malt after all those months of eating K rations and so forth. Well, then we went to New Guinea to wait an airplane, and there was a field hospital there, and they were short of help, so they asked for volunteers. Anyone ambulatory said, come and help us. So one guy got up to help, and there was an amputee there that he had his leg removed almost to the hip, and it was a fresh wound, and when that guy saw it, he just passed out and fainted and fell down in the aisle, and they put a pillow under his head and waited. He finally came to, and he looked so foolish as no doubt anybody would. Well, then we were flown back to the States. We stopped at Wayneville, not stop on the way back, and landed in California. And then I was taken to Fitzsimmons General Hospital in Denver. I had a short furlough there, and my leg wouldn't heal. It became infected. So they sent me then to Camp Atterbury, Indiana, to a plastic surgery center. And you just can't imagine the extent of the injuries that were there. There were men with both legs and arms amputated, and just unreal. But you know, all the time I never heard a complaint. These people were so happy that they made it where they were. Well, I was there for about 11 months, and I had surgery on the left leg, and they did plastic surgery, and they had to remove some of the skin and put it over the bone. The bone was partly shot away, and so we were filled to capacity. I don't know, that hospital was, I had a second, my bunk was on the second level. But we could get down, and we'd do wheelchair races down up the aisle, and that's so funny to see legs sticking out and guys doing wheelchair races. But I stayed there, and it was 11 months from the time I was wounded until I was discharged. and I was discharged 30% disabled, and I'm 70% disabled now, and it's the kind of disability I have. It gets worse by the day. I also have this problem you have after the war, reliving it. So that's one of the big problems of your memory has to go through that. But when I first got home, I had to, and if I drove a car, I had to have a pillow under my leg because it still was painful. But luckily I can get around pretty good. I have to use a walker. Because of the mortars and machine guns, I have lost part of my hearing, and I have trouble with my balance. But anyway, thank God I'm still here.
For these experiences that you had, LB, did you receive any recognitions or citations or commendations?
No, except that Silver Star I referred to that never did appear. No, the answer is no.
Well, there's the Purple Heart over there.
Well, yeah, Purple Heart and Good Conduct Medal.
I see a combat infantryman's badge on there.
Infantry, 3 Battle Stars. Yeah, there's a myriad of badges there, so to speak. Oh yes. I should add that, as it turns out, I had a brother-in-law who later became my brother-in-law in my same outfit. And after I was wounded, the unit was rebuilt, and they went on to another island. And I'm thinking that it was Korea. But anyway, the whole unit was wiped out except my brother-in-law. And that's how I found out about it. So the good Lord must have had a plan for me, the close calls that I had, and got through.
Did you ever have the opportunity, LB, to see any USO shows?
No, we didn't have any USO shows over there at all. I did see 2 celebrities. When we left, we were getting ready to leave Hawaii. At this time in history, most people didn't know that President Roosevelt was crippled. So they built a ramp, and he drove up there. They drove him up in a convertible, and our regiment passed in review. And I happened to be the guidon bearer, so I got to salute the president, and I could look at him, and the rest of the soldiers had to look straight ahead. And then in the Philippines, I was there when MacArthur returned. We made a column for him to go down 2 rows of soldiers, and I was told afterwards that he made him do the landing twice because he didn't like the first one. And other than that, there was no incident. But I was as far as, well, I suppose, 20 feet from General MacArthur.
We have a number of airplanes here at the Air Museum. Do you relate to any of those?
Just a C-47, that's the plane I rode in from the island to the shore to a hospital ship.
You also mentioned the Zero. You saw the Zero.
Oh yes,
and
I
we
saw
have
the
one
Zero.
of those out here too.
Oh yes, I saw the Zero. And P-38 was my favorite plane. I just think they were great, and I don't think they make them anymore, but the double fuselage just kind of caught my attention.
Tell us about any family members that you might have in the area here, and people you'd like to have receive a copy of your interview today?
Well, I have 2 children. My first wife was from Wisconsin, and she had Alzheimer's, and I took care of her for 7 years. And she passed away about 6 years ago. And I'm remarried now, and I have a daughter living here, and I have a son that lives in Williston. My wife Lois is from Page, and she has 5 children, and so I picked up a whole mess of relatives when we got married. And we live at Riverview Place, which is a retirement center. And when we were both in better physical condition, we both volunteered. I used to give tours of prospective renters at Riverview. And before I was married, I did a lot of volunteering. I worked at the front desk, I answered the telephone and helped in various ways. We started a program that called the Sunshine Group. And we called on former residents who were in nursing homes. Well, now we're physically unable to do that. And we really miss that because they were so happy to see us. A lot of them would cry when we left. They were so lonesome. And it's really too bad that we had to give that up.
What rank were you when you were discharged?
Rank?
Yes.
I was a sergeant.
Have you had any follow-up military after being discharged?
No, as I said before, my whole outfit was wiped out, so there would be no point to go to a convention or anything like that. And of course, with my disability, I didn't have any contact in the military fashion. So
Do you remember your serial number?
3722, 3495. And a guy at basic training says, you want to know how to remember your serial number? Just remember it in 2s, and that's the easy way.
After you were discharged, did you take advantage of the GI Bill in any way?
No, I received several certified letters to go on to school, but by that time I was married and I didn't think I could afford to go to school, so I just kept on working. Before I went into service, I worked for a Frisco Railroad. And I returned to that job and was a ticket agent for them. And after a while, I saw that the railroad transportation was dying very rapidly. So I resigned and moved to my wife's hometown, Wisconsin, and got a job in the bank there. And one of the fellows in the bank there got a job in the bank here, and he asked me to come with him, and that's how I got to Fargo.
Do you have any other additional comments or experience that you'd like to share with us at this time?
I think I've covered it all. Just I'm thinking.
Well, we want to thank you, Elbe, for spending time with us today. And we want to thank you for your service to our country.
Well, you're nice to say that, and I should close by saying that when I was wounded, I really felt guilty about leaving my unit, and I suppose I should have been jubilant about going home, but I just thought I was letting them down.